The one? Yeah. I thought that was all cheesy Hollywood nonsense. Until I met Ben. It was the kind of autumn day that looks like it's been edited. Golden leaves everywhere, a light breeze in the air, and that soft, fading sunlight that makes everything feel like a memory before it even happens. I was working an extra shift at the coffee shop near campus. The place was packed. Everyone wanted their pumpkin spice or chai latte or some overly complicated drink that made me question humanity. And then Ben walked in. He didn't order anything fancy, just a black coffee, no sugar. But it was the way he smiled at me when I handed it to him. Like we were sharing some inside joke no one else could hear. "Rough day?" I asked, half teasing. He chuckled. "Long class, philosophy. All we did was argue about whether anything is real." "Ah," I said. "So basically, coffee is the only truth left." That made him laugh, and I swear something inside me clicked, like my soul leaned in closer. He came in the next day, and the next, always with a book under his arm and that smile that made me forget I'd been on my feet for 6 hours straight. Eventually, he asked for my number, in the nerdiest, most awkward way. "So, would it be weird if I asked you out? I mean, if you're into guys who quote Plato and spill coffee on themselves." I said yes. Of course I did. Our first date was nothing fancy. Just sandwiches in the park and talking until the sun dipped below the trees. He listened when I talked. Like really listened. Like what I said actually mattered. And when he talked, it wasn't just small talk. It was dreams, fears, his childhood, my mom, life. He made me feel seen. We started spending every spare moment together, studying, laughing, watching dumb movies on my hand-me-down couch. We'd talk about the future like it was a story we were already writing. "I want 2 kids," he told me once, lying on the grass, fingers laced with mine. "Just 2? Well, maybe 3, if they're anything like you," I blushed. "I'd settle for 1 healthy baby and a dishwasher." He grinned. "Deal. But only if we have a house with a porch swing." We made promises, the kind that feel like forever when you're in your 20s and everything's still shiny and new. "I'll never leave you," he whispered once, after we made love for the first time. I remember staring at the ceiling, heart thudding, and thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe I really found my person. I didn't have much. No rich family, no fancy car, no roadmap for a perfect life. But with Ben, I had hope. And when he kissed my forehead and held me like I was made of something precious, I believed in that hope like it was religion. We talked about moving in together, marriage, maybe someday opening our own cafe, one where the tables didn't wobble and the coffee was always hot. And then, I found out I was pregnant. It was early spring, the world just starting to wake up again. I stood in our tiny bathroom, holding that test in shaking hands, staring at the word pregnant like it had been stamped into my future. I was scared. Of course I was. But I was also weirdly calm. 'Cause I had Ben. Or so I thought. I told him that night. I remember his face, that flicker of panic behind his eyes, quickly masked by a tight smile. "Wow," he said, hugging me. Okay, we'll figure this out." And for a while, it felt like we would. He kissed my belly, started reading baby books, talked about names and nursery colors and strollers that cost more than rent. But something started to shift. Little things, missed calls, cold silences, excuses about work or school or needing space. I tried to brush it off. I told myself he was just overwhelmed, that he'd come around, but deep down, I knew something was cracking. And a few weeks later, it broke. He left. But this chapter, this is the part I hold on to when I feel bitter or broken. Because no matter how it ended, for a while, we loved each other, fully, fiercely. And that love, imperfect as it was, gave me Emma, the best part of me. And for that, I'll always be grateful. They say your life can change in a moment. Mine changed in a bathroom stall with peeling wallpaper and a pregnancy test I couldn't afford but bought anyway. It was early. Too early, maybe, to panic. But my body knew. I was tired all the time, crying at commercials, and my morning coffee made me nauseous, which felt like betrayal. I loved coffee, but now even the smell made me gag. So I walked to the pharmacy in a daze, trying not to think. Picked the cheapest test off the shelf. The cashier didn't even look at me, thank God, because I was shaking so hard, I dropped the bag walking out the door. Back in my apartment, I sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at the instructions like I didn't know what to do. I'd read them 3 times. I was just stalling. I finally did it. Set the test on the counter and waited. It's funny how much you can think in 2 minutes. I thought about my mom, who passed away when I was 17. About how she used to brush my hair when I was sick. About the lullabies she sang when I was scared. I thought about Ben, his laugh, his smile, the way he said he'd always be there. And I thought about me, barely holding it together, juggling college classes, a part-time job, and the terrifying feeling that I was already in over my head. The timer on my phone buzzed. I took a breath and looked. 2 pink lines. 2 lines that meant I wasn't alone anymore. 2 lines that meant life would never be the same. I sat there for what felt like hours. I didn't cry, not right away. I didn't smile either. I just felt. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing you were about to jump and also knowing you couldn't go back. I touched my stomach, still flat and soft and mine. But now, it wasn't just mine, was it? There was someone else in there, someone I hadn't planned for, someone I wasn't ready for, and still, deep in that chaos of fear and shock, there was a flicker of something else. Joy. The tiniest, most fragile joy, but real. I thought about the little heartbeat I couldn't hear yet, the tiny fingers that hadn't even formed. A little soul, completely dependent on me. I was going to be a mom. I whispered it out loud, just to see if it felt real. I'm going to be a mom. It scared me. God, it scared me, but also, it gave me purpose in a way nothing else ever had. I wasn't ready, not financially, not emotionally. I didn't even have a crib, let alone a plan. But in that quiet, surreal moment, I made another silent promise. No matter what happens, I will protect you. I didn't know yet that Ben would leave, that my world would fall apart before it got better, that nights would come when I'd cry so hard into my pillow, the baby would start kicking as if to say, "It's okay, Mama, I'm here." But I knew this. I loved my baby, even in my fear, even in my confusion, even in my loneliness. And that love, that was stronger than anything else. I still remember the exact way the sunlight hit the blinds that morning. Too bright, too calm. Funny how the world doesn't stop when your heart is about to break. I had spent all night rehearsing how to tell him. I had played every version in my head. The soft one, the direct one, the we'll figure this out together one. Part of me still believed he'd smile, maybe be shocked at first, maybe even scared. But deep down, I thought he'd pull me into his arms and say, "We've got this." Instead, he pulled away. It was a Saturday. I was in his apartment, sitting on the edge of his bed, my hands pressed against my knees to stop them from shaking. I told him simply, quietly, "I'm pregnant." He stared at me, just stared. I tried to read his face, but there was nothing there, just silence. I took 2 tests, I added, as if evidence would help. Still nothing. "Ben, did you hear me?" He blinked slowly, then stood up, walked to the window, rubbed his jaw. I remember the way his back looked, how tall he seemed in that moment, like a stranger. Finally, he said, "I'm not ready for this." My heart dropped. "Neither am I, but we can be, together." He turned around, eyes wide like I'd said something absurd. "Together?" He let out a short laugh. "Lily, I'm 23. I'm still figuring my own life out. A baby? That's not part of the plan." I felt like I'd been slapped. What do you mean not part of the plan? I asked. You said you loved me. I do. He said it too fast, too automatically. I do. But love doesn't fix this. This changes everything. I'm not ready to be someone's dad. Tears started burning behind my eyes. I stood up. So what? You're just going to walk away? He didn't answer. That silence told me everything. You know what's funny? I said, choking on the words. I was scared too. I didn't plan this either, but the moment I saw those 2 lines, I knew I had to be strong. I thought maybe you'd feel the same. That maybe, deep down, you were the kind of man who'd rise to the moment. His jaw tightened. Don't make me the bad guy. This isn't what I signed up for. No, I said. You didn't sign up, but life doesn't always ask for permission. He turned away again. I'm sorry, I can't do this. And just like that, he was gone. He didn't yell, didn't slam a door. He just left, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and never really came back. 1 minute, I was someone's girlfriend, someone's forever. The next, I was a single pregnant woman, standing alone in a room filled with someone else's dreams. I walked home that day in a daze. My phone buzzed with texts I didn't answer. The world blurred around me. The sound of cars, of people laughing, of someone playing music through a window. And I felt like I was underwater, drowning in my own silence. That night, I curled up on the couch and cried so hard, I thought my body might shatter from the inside out. I cried for the love that disappeared in a heartbeat. I cried for the child growing inside me, innocent, unaware, already abandoned. And I cried for the version of me that believed promises couldn't break. But in between the sobs, I felt a flutter, a soft, sudden tap from within, like a tiny hand saying, I'm here. It stopped me, just for a second. And that's when I realized, he may have left, but I was not alone. I still had this little life inside me, and that meant I still had something to fight for, to live for, to become stronger for. Ben shattered the world I thought I knew. But sometimes, the breaking is where the rebuilding begins. If heartbreak was hard, poverty made it cruel. The first month after Ben left felt like a fog I couldn't clear. The mornings came too early, the nights stretched too long. I was sick most days. Morning sickness, stress sickness, maybe heartbreak disguised as nausea. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. And then the first late rent notice came. I stood there in the doorway of my tiny apartment, holding that bright pink paper in my hand like it was a piece of my own shame. I hadn't even seen it coming. I'd been so caught up in survival, emotionally, that I hadn't realized how fast the numbers in my bank account were disappearing. The leftovers from my part-time receptionist job were barely enough for groceries, let alone rent. I sat on the floor of my kitchen, surrounded by unopened mail, and just wept. Pregnant. Alone. And now, behind, on bills. You never forget the first time you realize you have no one to call. My mom had passed years ago. Ben? Gone. Friends? Slipping away, unsure what to say to the girl who got herself into this. I was invisible, except to the baby growing inside me and the landlord who wanted his money. I ate ramen 3 nights in a row. I walked instead of taking the bus, even when my legs were swollen and my back ached. I sold a few of Ben's old video games just to buy prenatal vitamins. I'd stand in the grocery aisle calculating every cent, sometimes putting things back with shaking hands, whispering, "Next time, baby, next time." I tried to pick up more hours at work, but my boss, though polite, was clearly uncomfortable with my growing belly. One afternoon, I fainted on the job. The stress, the lack of food, the exhaustion. It all caught up with me. I remember waking up on the break room floor, a wet paper towel pressed to my forehead by the office janitor, and my boss awkwardly standing by, mumbling about maybe taking some time off for your health. It wasn't long after that when I got laid off due to restructuring. Another tear, another notice. I started skipping prenatal appointments because I couldn't afford the copay. I'd lie on my side at night, holding my belly and whisper, "I'm trying. I promise I'm trying." But some nights, even my promise felt like a lie. The loneliness hit differently during those dark hours. No one to rub my back. No one to reassure me when I woke up from a nightmare of giving birth alone in a hospital bed with no one waiting. No hand to hold. No car rides to doctor appointments. No shared laughter over baby name lists. Just me and the ceiling fan humming above my head, spinning in endless circles like the thoughts in my mind. I had one breakdown in the middle of the laundromat. My last $5 bill slipped out of my coat pocket and disappeared under a machine. I fell to my knees trying to reach for it, my belly pressing against the floor, tears streaming down my face, while a stranger handed me a crumpled dollar and walked away without a word. That was when I realized I had hit a new kind of rock bottom, the kind that wasn't loud, but quiet and aching. A loneliness so vast it echoed in your bones, but something inside me refused to give up. Not because I was brave, not because I was strong, but because I had no choice. Every day I had to get up. Because this baby, this tiny heartbeat inside me, deserved a mother who tried. Even if trying meant crying in between job applications. Even if it meant eating less so there was enough money for a prenatal visit. Even if it meant falling apart at night, only to patch myself back together by morning. So yes, I was broke. Yes, I was heartbroken, but I was still standing. And sometimes, that's where resilience is born. Not in triumph, but in the quiet decision to keep going, even when your world is in pieces. They say the moment your child is born, your life changes forever. But no one tells you how quiet the delivery room can feel when you're alone. I remember gripping the sides of the hospital bed as another contraction rolled through me like a tidal wave. My gown was soaked in sweat. My hair was plastered to my face. I was exhausted and terrified, and God, I was so alone. There were nurses, of course, and a kind doctor whose name I never remembered. But no one holding my hand. No one whispering, "You can do this," beside me. And yet, somehow, I did. With one final push and a cry that tore through the silence like a miracle, she arrived. My daughter, my tiny, perfect, screaming little girl. The nurse placed her on my chest, and suddenly the whole world stopped. She was warm and slippery and pink, and her eyes were tightly shut. But her little hand reached up, instinctive, desperate, and it landed right over my heart. That was the moment. Not when she cried, not when I cut the cord. Not even when the doctor said, "Congratulations, Mom." It was that tiny hand, resting on my chest, that reminded me this is what love is. Raw, unconditional, life-altering. I stared at her, tears rolling freely down my cheeks, and whispered, "It's you and me now, baby girl. Just us." The fear didn't disappear in that moment. The bills didn't magically vanish. The pain of abandonment didn't dissolve. But something else arrived, something bigger. Purpose. I had spent months crying over a man who left. I had counted coins for groceries, skipped meals, begged landlords for mercy. But in that instant, with her heartbeat against mine, I felt stronger than I'd ever felt in my life. I was a mother now. I named her Hope, because that's what she gave me. In the days that followed, exhaustion was real. There were moments when I stared at the crib wondering how I'd keep her safe, fed, warm. There were nights she screamed endlessly, and I'd hold her, swaying back and forth, humming lullabies through tears. My body ached, my breasts were sore, and sleep was a distant memory. But I never felt alone again. Hope became my reason to rise, my reason to fight. She didn't know how the world had broken me, and she didn't care. To her, I was the whole world. My voice calmed her. My touch soothed her. My presence was enough. And somehow, that made me start believing. Maybe I was enough too. I'd wake up to her tiny yawns, her fists stretching toward the sky like she was reaching for dreams already. Her smile, oh God, that gummy little smile, was a balm to every scar inside me. She didn't care that I was broke, that I lived in a tiny room with peeling paint, that I fed her formula I got from WIC and wore the same pajamas 3 days in a row. She just wanted me, her mom, and I gave her everything. I started writing again, late at night, while she slept curled against me. Journaling, dreaming, creating. I wasn't sure where it would lead, but it felt like a part of me was waking up again, like Hope's birth had rebirthed me too. And in the stillness of those nights, with her soft breathing in my ear, I would whisper, "We're going to be okay. I don't know how yet, but we will." Because she gave me something no one else ever had. Not Ben, not my job, not even my past. She gave me a reason to believe again, a tiny hand in mine. And suddenly, I wasn't afraid of the future anymore. If anyone ever tells you that being a single mother is just about being strong, smile politely and know they have no idea what they're talking about. Because strength doesn't even begin to cover it. This chapter of my life, it was survival. Bare bones, sleep-deprived, emotionally drained survival. After Hope was born, the world didn't pause to let me catch my breath. Bills still came, rent was still due, and I didn't get maternity leave. I got 2 weeks of unpaid absence before the diner manager gave my job to someone else. I had $63 in my bank account the day I brought Hope home. I counted every dollar like it was sacred. Diapers or food, baby formula or rent. There was no right choice, only desperate ones. Hope woke up every 2 hours. Her tiny cries echoed in our one-room studio like an alarm bell for all the things I couldn't give her. I would bounce her in my arms until my legs burned, humming softly while silently praying she'd fall asleep long enough for me to rest. But rest never came, because the second she slept, my thoughts would scream louder than she ever could. What if the landlord kicks us out? What if she gets sick and I can't afford the doctor? What if I fail her completely? Sometimes I would open the fridge and stare at half a jar of peanut butter, a bottle of ketchup, and an old slice of bread. And I'd laugh hysterically, bitterly, because crying had already been used up the night before. I made sacrifices without even thinking. I didn't eat so she could. I skipped showers. I wore the same clothes. I used napkins from the gas station as wipes when I ran out. I went days without talking to anyone. And when I did, it was usually just me whispering to Hope, "You're okay, baby. We're okay. Mama's got you." But truthfully, I wasn't okay. There were nights I would sit on the bathroom floor with Hope asleep in her crib, holding my face in my hands, shaking from exhaustion. No sleep, no food, no peace. Just this weight pressing on my chest that never let up. I couldn't afford daycare, so I cleaned apartments with Hope strapped to me in a baby carrier. I did laundry for neighbors. I walked 5 miles one way to a part-time cashier job because I couldn't afford the bus fare. I remember one day standing in line at the grocery store with a handful of baby formula and a few cans of beans. I swiped my EBT card and the cashier said, "You're $3.79 short." I didn't have it. I felt everyone's eyes on me as I stood there, embarrassed, my face hot. And then an older woman behind me handed the cashier a $5 bill. She smiled at me, not pitying, just kind. That $3.79 wasn't just money. It was grace. It was humanity. It was hope. I left the store holding back tears, clutching Hope tighter than ever. Being a single mom wasn't just about the diapers and midnight feedings. It was fighting to keep my head above water with weights tied to my ankles. It was guilt, deep, gnawing guilt that I couldn't give her more. It was fear of losing everything, of never being enough. It was loneliness, the kind that settled in your bones. But it was also something else. It was resilience, because no matter how broken I felt, I still got up the next day. I still held her, fed her, rocked her, sang to her. I still made it to the next paycheck, even if it came in tips and coins from the couch. No sleep, no food, no peace. But I had purpose, I had a daughter who looked up at me like I was the whole universe. And somehow, that kept me going. Because I wasn't just fighting for me anymore. I was fighting for us. You never think you'll be the one in line. You drive past government buildings your whole life, see people walking out with manila folders or heavy strollers, and you think, that'll never be me. Until it is. Until your bank account shows $0.83 and your baby's formula tin is nearly empty. I remember the day I first walked into the Department of Human Services. The air smelled like fluorescent lights and tired souls. The chairs were plastic and hard. The walls were beige, like the building itself was trying to disappear. Everything about it said, "Don't get too comfortable here." I wasn't. Hope was in her car seat beside me, sleeping with her little fists balled up near her face. I clutched the envelope of documents I'd spent the night before gathering: ID, birth certificate, proof of rent, a copy of my old pay stub. My hands were sweaty. When the woman behind the plexiglass called my number, I stood up too fast and nearly tripped over my own feet. She didn't look up when I sat down, just asked my name and date of birth like she was reading it from a cereal box. "I'm here to apply for WEC and food stamps," I said, my voice small. She nodded, typing quickly. "Do you have any income?" "No, not right now. I was working at a diner before the baby." She didn't blink, just kept typing. The whole process took maybe 20 minutes, but it felt like an hour. When she handed me the EBT card and the paper packet for WIC, I whispered, "Thank you," even though she didn't look like she wanted gratitude. I walked out of that office and sat on the curb next to my stroller and cried. Not from relief, but shame. Because society doesn't really make room for women like me to fall. It holds your hand while you climb, but if you slip, it pulls it away and watches. People don't see the desperation or the strength it takes to ask for help. They see a stereotype, a label: lazy, irresponsible, trash. Even when I went to use the WIC checks at the grocery store, I'd get looks. Sometimes the cashier would sigh loudly, flipping through the coupons like they were dirty. Once, a woman behind me muttered, "I'm glad my tax dollars are feeding her kid." I turned around, met her eyes, and smiled. Not because I felt kind, but because I refused to let her see the wound she'd just reopened. I wanted to scream at her, "You don't know me. You don't know how many nights I went hungry so my daughter wouldn't. You don't know what I gave up just to be here, standing upright, buying baby formula with a government voucher and my dignity tucked in my back pocket." But I didn't scream. I held my head high. Because shame only wins if you carry it like truth. Truth was, I was doing everything I could. Welfare wasn't some golden ticket. It was a safety net with holes in it. I still couldn't afford rent half the time. Still had to decide between electricity and diapers. Still cried behind bathroom doors so Hope wouldn't see. But the food stamps bought rice, beans, canned veggies, and formula. The WIC checks gave me baby cereal and juice and milk. It wasn't everything, but it was something. And sometimes, something is all you need to keep going. The hardest part wasn't poverty. It was people, their whispers, their glances, their assumptions. They looked at me and saw a girl who messed up. A statistic. What they didn't see was the 3 a.m. feedings, the job applications that went unanswered, the nights I rocked my baby while praying for one more miracle. It took me months to stop apologizing every time I pulled out my EBT card. Took even longer to stop looking over my shoulder in checkout lines. I had to learn that survival isn't shameful, that asking for help is not weakness, it's courage, dressed in sweatpants and tear-streaked cheeks. I used to feel like I had to explain myself to everyone. Now, I don't owe anyone an explanation for trying to keep my daughter fed. What I owe to her, to myself, is the truth, that I did what I had to do. With grace, with grit, with love. And someday, I'd look back at this chapter not with shame, but with pride, because it was never about the judgment. It was about the fight, and I was still fighting. I was down to 3 diapers, a quarter tank of gas, and 1 last ounce of pride. There was this moment, this quiet, terrifying moment, where I stared at my daughter sleeping on the couch, cheeks flushed, arms flopped out like angel wings, and I whispered, "I don't know how much more I can do, baby. I just don't." But life, in all its cruel irony, sometimes throws you a rope edge. And that rope? It came in the form of strangers. The first one was Mrs. Ellis, my neighbor from 2 doors down. She was in her late 60s, with snow-white hair, oversized sunglasses, and a yard full of plastic flamingos. I hadn't spoken to her much beyond a polite hello in passing. But one day, as I was dragging 2 bags of groceries and a cranky Hope up the stairs, she called out from her porch, "You look like you're trying to carry the whole world." I gave her a tired smile. "Feels like it some days." She walked over, lifted 1 bag with ease, and said, "Well then, let me carry a corner of it." And just like that, she was in our lives. She'd knock on my door some mornings with a carton of eggs or a bag of oranges and say, "They were on sale, figured you could use some too." One afternoon, I came home to find a small envelope tucked in my mailbox. No return address, no note, just $50 inside, crumpled, worn, life-saving, and I wept. Because someone, maybe Mrs. Ellis, maybe a total stranger, saw me, really saw me. Another time, when I was at the laundromat late at night, folding a mix of hand-me-down baby clothes and worn-out sweatpants, a man in a mechanic's uniform tapped my shoulder. "You dropped this," he said, holding up a baby sock. I thanked him, and we exchanged the usual small talk. The weather, the busted vending machine, how cute Hope looked drooling on my shoulder. A few minutes later, as I was gathering my things, he said, "I know this is weird, but I've been where you are. Single dad. Years ago. Someone helped me once. I'd like to pay it forward." He handed me a gas card. "I'm not a creep. I get it." And with a small nod, he left before I could even say thank you. That gas card got me to 2 job interviews. Strangers became my village. A woman at the community clinic once slipped a teddy bear into Hope's diaper bag when I wasn't looking. The clerk at the grocery store who saw me putting back a box of diapers and just rang them up anyway, whispering, "It's on me." And then there was Jacob, the night janitor at the diner I eventually got a part-time job at. He saw me crying in the break room one night, when I thought no one else was around. I'd just gotten off the phone with my landlord, who said he'd have to evict me if rent didn't come in by Friday. I wiped my tears quickly and apologized. He handed me his half-eaten sandwich and said, "Don't apologize for being human. This world is too hard on people who are already bleeding." He didn't give me money, he gave me dignity, and some nights that was more valuable than rent. These people, these souls, I may never see some of them again. I don't even know all their names, but they reminded me that not everyone walks past the broken. Some stop, some kneel, some offer a hand and don't demand a thank you. And you know what? That changed me. I stopped seeing help as weakness. I stopped seeing kindness as charity. It was connection. A thread tying strangers together in a moment of shared humanity. We don't talk enough about how powerful one gesture can be. One diaper, one gas card, one sandwich, one smile. When you're drowning, you don't need someone to save your whole life. You just need someone to remind you that you're not invisible. I was far from okay, but I wasn't alone. And sometimes, that makes all the difference. Tea started with a flyer taped to the window of the corner diner. "Help wanted. Evenings and weekends. Inquire inside." Hope was asleep in her carrier, strapped to my chest as I stood there reading those bold letters. My hands were shaking, part from the chill in the wind, part from the fear that I wouldn't be good enough, again. I hadn't worked since I was 4 months pregnant. I'd left my retail job back then thinking I'd have a supportive partner. We all know how that turned out. I stared at the sign for a long time, long enough that a teenage girl inside the diner spotted me and gave me a little wave through the window. She looked friendly, inviting, like maybe I wasn't completely out of place. I looked down at Hope. Her lips were parted in sleep, her tiny fist resting on her chest like she was holding her little heart. "I have to try," I whispered to her. "For you, for me." I pushed the door open. The diner smelled like burnt coffee, pancakes, and something deep fried. Familiar, warm, terrifying. I asked for the manager. She was a woman in her late 40s, red hair tied in a messy bun, pen behind her ear, and tired eyes that didn't miss a thing. Her name was Deb. "You ever worked in a diner?" she asked, arms folded. I told her I'd worked in retail, but I could learn fast. I told her I had a baby and I wouldn't lie to her about my schedule. I told her I was reliable, grateful, and desperately willing to work. She looked me up and down, not judging, just assessing. Then she glanced at Hope and said, "Can you start tomorrow?" I almost cried. Instead, I nodded. The first few shifts were rough. My feet ached. My back screamed. I dropped a tray of water glasses once and wanted to quit right there, but Deb just smirked and said, "Now you've been baptized. Welcome to diner life." Every dollar I earned felt like a mountain moved. It wasn't much, minimum wage and shared tips, but it was mine. The first time I bought diapers and formula without an EBT card, I held the receipt like it was a trophy. The first time I filled my gas tank all the way to full, I felt like a queen. I started finding pieces of myself again in the clatter of dishes, the rush of the dinner crowd, the way customers smiled when I remembered their order. I had forgotten what it felt like to be useful, to be more than someone's burden or case number. I had value again. Even if it was just for 6-hour shifts slinging coffee and scrambled eggs, I mattered. Deb became a mentor. She didn't coddle me. She was tough, but fair. One night after closing, she handed me a piece of pie and said, "You've got guts, kid. Don't forget that." A lot of people would have given up by now. I didn't tell her, but that pie tasted like validation. Hope would stay with Mrs. Ellis on the evenings I worked, and sometimes I'd come home to find a little note in her diaper bag. Hope laughed a lot today. Or she stood up all on her own. I'd sit on my bed, eating leftover fries and staring at those notes, feeling like I was finally doing something right. I didn't have a grand plan yet. No college degree, no savings, but I had movement. I had momentum. I had the first flicker of independence lighting up inside me like a firefly on a summer night. And it all started with that one job. It didn't make me rich, but it made me brave. People talk about balancing it all like it's some graceful act, like you're walking a tightrope in a sparkly outfit with applause waiting on the other side. For me, it was more like stumbling across a rope bridge in the middle of a storm, baby in one arm, exhaustion in the other, and no applause anywhere in sight. I'd finish my shift at the diner around midnight, most nights. The streets would be quiet by then, headlights cutting through the dark like silent questions. I'd drive home with the radio off, too tired for music, my hands stiff on the wheel, my mind already dreading the next morning. Hope would be asleep by the time I got her from Mrs. Ellis's house. That woman had a heart of gold, never charged me a dime, always had Hope fed and clean, wrapped in a little blanket with flowers on it. I'd whisper thank you every time, and she'd just pat my shoulder and say, "You're doing what you gotta do." Back home, I'd tiptoe through the apartment with my arms burning, my feet swollen, and my soul aching in places I didn't know existed. I'd check the fridge, maybe half a carton of milk, maybe a leftover sandwich I brought home from the diner. Then I'd stand in the bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror. Sometimes I didn't recognize the girl looking back at me. There were dark circles under my eyes that wouldn't go away. My once shiny hair now lived in a permanent bun. My skin looked tired, not old, just worn, like life had rubbed off the shine. And the questions would creep in, like they always did at that hour. Are you really enough? What if you mess this up? Is Hope going to grow up and hate you for how hard things were? I'd cry quietly some nights, hunched over the sink so I wouldn't wake her. Not out of weakness, but out of sheer release, because I was carrying so much and had nowhere to put it. Then, without fail, hope would stir in her crib. A soft little whimper, a sleepy rustle of her tiny body. I'd go to her, scoop her up, and sit in the rocking chair by the window. The world outside would be silent, street lamps buzzing, a car passing every now and then. And there I'd be, with this little person curled into me like I was the only safe place she knew. And maybe I was. In those quiet moments, between one heartbeat and the next, I'd remind myself, this is temporary, this is hard, yes, but it's not forever. The mornings came too fast. Hope was an early riser. Always had been. I'd get maybe 4 hours of sleep if I was lucky. And then it was diapers and bottles and cleaning and making sure she didn't crawl straight into danger. There were days I snapped, not at her, but at the weight of it all, at the unpaid bills, at the loneliness, at the guilt of not being able to give her more, at myself. But every time I reached what felt like my edge, something tiny, maybe Hope's laugh, or a text from Mrs. Turner saying, "You've got this," or even just a cup of coffee that didn't taste like cardboard, pulled me back. I was learning slowly, painfully, what it meant to endure, what it meant to push through the fog even when you're so tired you forget your own name. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. And if I could survive one more day, I told myself, maybe I could survive 2, then 3, then a week, then a month. That's how I did it. Not by being some superhero, but by showing up day after broken, exhausted day. For hope, for me. I remember the night I decided to go back to school like it was a turning point in a storm. The rain hadn't stopped. The sky was still gray, but for the first time, I saw a sliver of light in the distance. It wasn't much, but it was something. It started with a conversation at the diner. I was on my break sipping weak coffee at the back counter when Trina, one of the other servers, sat beside me. She was older than me, maybe in her 40s, with a laugh that could cut through noise and a heart that noticed things most people missed. "You ever think about doing something else?" she asked. Just out of the blue, I blinked. "What do you mean? Like outside of this place? School, maybe? You're sharp. You remember people's orders after hearing them once. That's not nothing," I laughed nervously. "I don't know. I've got a baby, and bills, and barely 4 hours of sleep. Night school isn't exactly in the cards." She gave me a look. That older woman, don't give me that crap kind of look. "Girl, if anyone's earned a seat in a classroom, it's you." That stuck with me. Later that night, after Hope had gone to sleep and I was folding a load of laundry on the floor, I pulled out my phone and started Googling community college night classes near me. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, a sign, a miracle, an escape. But what I found was a listing for a local college offering a program in medical office administration, flexible hours, part-time schedule, online options, and a little note that read, "Perfect for working moms and career changers." I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't have money, I didn't have time, but I had dreams. Quiet ones, faint ones, but still alive under all the noise of survival. I bookmarked the page and closed my phone, but the next day, I went back to it, again and again, until I finally whispered to myself, "Why not me?" And that question, it changed everything. I applied that night, filled out every form in between Hope's diaper changes and dinner. I didn't even tell anyone at first, not even Mrs. Turner. I think I was scared. Scared of hoping, scared of believing in something again. But a few weeks later, the acceptance email landed in my inbox, and I just sat there in stunned silence. "Congratulations, you've been accepted." Those words made me cry. Happy tears for once. I was still barely scraping by, still serving tables and changing diapers and running on caffeine and stubbornness. But now I had something more. 2 nights a week, I became a student. I'd leave Hope with Mrs. Turner, pack my notes into a hand-me-down backpack, and step into a fluorescent-lit classroom with other tired adults who were chasing second chances. The first class was awkward. I hadn't written a paper in years. I didn't know how to use the online portal. I kept double-checking if I had locked the car. My imposter syndrome was screaming in my ears the entire time. But you know what? I kept going. Because every time I sat in that classroom, I felt closer to the woman I used to dream about becoming. Not the perfect woman, not a magazine cover woman, but a woman with options, with pride, with a future she was building with her own hands, one class at a time, one chapter at a time, one exhausted but determined night at a time. Going back to school didn't fix everything overnight, but it gave me a direction, a map to follow when I'd been wandering so long I forgot what it was like to move forward. And even though the path was steep, it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I was walking it. Some days, I felt like I was made of paper. Thin, fragile, barely holding together with tape and whispered prayers. People talk a lot about resilience, but not enough about the price it takes to keep standing when you're crumbling inside. There were nights when I'd put Hope to bed, lie down on the floor next to her crib, and cry so silently that not even the walls could hear me. The weight of it all, motherhood, work, school, loneliness, guilt, pressure, it built up like a storm in my chest. I didn't know I was dealing with depression. I didn't even have the language for it. All I knew was that I'd wake up with a heaviness I couldn't shake and fall asleep feeling like a failure, no matter how much I had survived that day. But still, I kept going. Because moms don't get sick days. And broken or not, I had a little girl who needed me to show up. But one day, I couldn't. Not fully. It was after a long double shift at the diner. My feet were blistered. My eyes were sore from the screen glare at school the night before. And Hope had been crying for hours with a teething fever that wouldn't let up. I snapped. Not at her, never at her. But something in me cracked open, and I just sat on the kitchen floor with cold spaghetti on the stove and dishes piled in the sink. And I said out loud, I can't do this anymore. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud, just real. A whisper from a tired soul to a quiet room. And in that moment, something shifted. I didn't feel weak. I felt seen. By myself for the first time in a long time. That night, I did something I never thought I would. I Googled free counseling for single moms. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I found a local women's shelter that offered therapy and mental health support on a sliding scale. I filled out the form, almost ashamed, but also a little relieved. And a week later, I sat across from a woman in a small, warm office who asked me gently, "When was the last time you took care of you?" I couldn't answer. I just cried. Those sessions became a lifeline. I started understanding that I wasn't broken. I was overwhelmed, undersupported, and surviving trauma that hadn't even begun to heal. I learned to give myself grace. I learned that strength doesn't always look like powering through. Sometimes it looks like pausing. Sometimes it looks like asking for help. And slowly, things got better, not easier, but lighter. There were small victories that no one else could see. The first night Hope slept through without me checking if she was breathing. The first A on a school assignment. The first time I bought groceries without using food stamps. Tiny wins. But to me, they were monuments. I remember standing in front of the mirror one morning, brushing my hair, really brushing it, not just tying it up in a tired bun, and I actually saw her. Me, not just someone's mother, not just someone's daughter, but a woman, living, fighting, healing. I even started writing a little again, short notes to myself. Nothing fancy, just scribbles on a notepad taped to the fridge. Still here. You got through the last one. You'll get through this too. Hope is watching. Be proud. I wasn't perfect. I still had anxiety attacks. I still had days where all I could do was the bare minimum. But I was building a foundation now. Inside myself. Something steady. Something that wouldn't collapse at the first sign of struggle. Mental health wasn't a destination I arrived at. It was, and still is, a journey. But now I have tools. Now I know I deserve help. Now I know my breakdowns don't cancel out my breakthroughs. They coexist. Like the night and the morning, like fear and courage, like me and my daughter, both growing, both surviving, both learning to smile again. I used to dream of graduation day when I was younger. In my mind, I was walking across a big stage, wearing heels that clicked with confidence, my parents cheering from the front row, and the world wide open in front of me like a sunlit highway. But life rewrote that version of the story. Instead of heels, I wore secondhand flats that pinched my feet. Instead of parents, there were strangers clapping politely from folding chairs in a community college gym. And instead of walking that stage with a tidy cap and a polished smile, I had my daughter on my hip, tugging on my gown with her tiny fists and a sippy cup in my bag next to my diploma holder. And somehow, it was even more beautiful than I ever imagined. That morning, I remember standing in front of the mirror, holding my cap in one hand and hope in the other. She had spilled milk on my tassel, and my makeup was barely holding after a sleepless night. But when I looked at us, I didn't see a mess. I saw a miracle. I saw every single breakdown that didn't break me. Every night I cried over textbooks while she napped in my lap. Every shift I worked, every dollar I stretched, every no I turned into a not yet. We made it. We made it. The ceremony was small, as community college graduations often are. No orchestra, no confetti, just names being read, people clapping, and a sense of quiet victory in the air. When they called mine, I hesitated for a split second. My legs felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. And then Hope giggled, just a little, as if reminding me, "Go on, Mama. You did this." So I walked, with her in my arms, heads turned, people smiled, some whispered. One woman even wiped a tear. And when I reached the dean and accepted that diploma, shaking his hand with one arm and holding my daughter with the other, I felt something shift inside me. Pride, real pride. Not the kind you wear for show, but the kind that lives deep in your bones. The kind that doesn't need anyone else's approval. I wasn't just graduating from school. I was graduating from the version of me who thought she wasn't strong enough, who thought motherhood would end her dreams, who thought being left meant she'd be stuck forever. That piece of paper meant I could build a future now, not just for me, but for the little girl with the toothy smile who watched me more closely than anyone else in that gym. After the ceremony, I didn't have a party. We went home. I microwaved mac and cheese. I hung my gown on the back of the closet door. And when Hope fell asleep that night, I sat beside her crib, diploma in my lap, and cried. Again, but this time it was different. It wasn't exhaustion. It wasn't fear. It was release. All those nights of questioning my worth, all the whispers of "you're just a single mom," they faded, because today I wasn't just anything. I was a graduate. I was a provider. I was a mother who never gave up. And as I folded that gown and tucked it away, I made a silent promise. This is only the beginning. You know that feeling when you've been running on empty for so long that you forget what it feels like to breathe easy? That was me. Right after graduation. Hope was growing fast, learning new words every day, and my nights of studying had finally turned into nights of job searching. I'd send out resumes while she stacked blocks beside me on the carpet. I'd rock her to sleep, then stay up another hour tweaking my cover letters. Some nights, I cried over job postings that asked for 3 to 5 years of experience when I barely had one. But I kept knocking. Click, send, repeat, click, send, repeat. For weeks, it was all rejection or worse, silence. I'd walk to the mailbox, praying for something that didn't start with "we regret to inform you." I began to wonder if maybe I was foolish for dreaming this big. Maybe people like me didn't get a seat at the table. But then, ding. An email. Subject. Interview invitation. My hands shook. I read it 3 times just to be sure. It was a small marketing firm, nothing fancy, but they'd seen my resume, noticed the freelance projects I'd done, and wanted to talk. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever, hope tugging at my sleeve. Mama. Yeah, baby. Mama might have a job interview. She didn't understand, of course, but she smiled like I'd just won the lottery. The interview, I borrowed a blazer from Mrs. Turner. It didn't quite fit, but it was close enough. I dropped Hope at her little daycare center and took the bus downtown. Every bump, every red light, it all felt like a test of my patience. When I walked into that office, I felt like an imposter. My resume wasn't perfect. My shoes were scuffed. And when they asked me about myself, I was tempted to lie, to pretend I was someone smoother, shinier, more put together. But something in me, maybe exhaustion, maybe courage, decided to just be honest. I told them about being a single mom, about graduating with a baby on my hip, about doing freelance social media work from a beat-up laptop while Hope napped on the couch. I saw their expressions change, not in pity, but in respect. The woman interviewing me leaned forward and said, "You've done more with less than most people do with everything." I didn't get too hopeful. I'd been burned before, but 2 days later, ding, another email. Subject: welcome to the team. The first day, it wasn't glamorous. I had a desk near the back, a stack of onboarding paperwork, and a passcode to the shared bathroom. But I had a badge. I had a computer with my name on the login screen. I had a paycheck coming in 2 weeks. And when I picked Hope up that evening, I knelt down and whispered, "Mama got the job." She clapped. No idea what it really meant, but she clapped like it was magic, and it was. Looking back, you see, life didn't open its doors for me easily. I had to knock, hard, loud, over and over, sometimes with my fists, sometimes with my tears, and sometimes with trembling hope that maybe, just maybe, someone on the other side would hear me. That first job wasn't my dream job, but it was my first key, the one that unlocked the next chapter of my life. It wasn't just about earning money, it was about dignity, about feeling human again, about knowing I could build something out of nothing. And let me tell you, nothing beats walking into a space that once felt too big for you and realizing you belong there now. You earned it, every step, every scar, every door you refuse to walk away from. They say success doesn't come overnight. They're right. It comes slowly, one sleepless night at a time. After I landed that first job, things started to shift. I had stability, something I hadn't felt in years. A regular paycheck, health insurance, daycare I could finally afford. I could breathe again. Not deeply, but just enough to feel something close to peace. But peace, that wasn't enough. Something inside me started whispering, "You didn't come this far to stop here." I had always had a creative side, buried beneath diapers, overdue bills, and the never-ending hum of survival. It would show up in quiet moments, like when I designed a flyer for the church bake sale, or redid someone's resume for fun, or when I managed to bring a struggling brand's Instagram page back to life from my office cubicle. And one day, while riding the bus home, I scribbled something in my notebook. Hope and Company, branding with heart. That was the name. Inspired by my daughter. Inspired by the one person who kept me going. Starting from scratch, I didn't have investors. I didn't have savings. What I had was a cracked old laptop, a free Canva account, and fire in my soul. I started small, offering to create logos for local shops for next to nothing, helping other single moms write business bios or polish LinkedIn profiles. I built a website on weekends, learned more about SEO during lunch breaks, and pitched myself to anyone who'd listen. There were nights I stared at the ceiling, wondering what the